This time, the terror has followed you home. A sentence that will ring in the ears of horror fanatics and curious theorists across the globe non-stop for the next few months. Where some collect pleasure from the gratuitous scares of the game when peeking around the wrong corner, there's always a few people that show interest in the lore, staying up ultra late just to find out who the real killer is, or why the animatronics behave the way they do. To those few people, welcome. You play as an unnamed child trapped in his bedroom by terrors throughout the house. Literal animatronic nightmares threaten your safety and force you to keep a lookout from the security of your bedroom. Your flashlight is your weapon. Catch the monsters at the end of the hallway to spook them off, but beware if something is too close to the door. Shining a light in its eyes might spell your end. Observe some subtle callbacks to the first game, such as Foxy hiding in the closet to represent Pirate's Cove, and the two-door layout of the room. The kitchen is the only room not visible in the house, just like the kitchen camera was offline in Five Nights 1, and Bonnie and Chica approach respectively from the left and the right, the same as in the first game. Previous games are referenced as well. The ending screen to Five Nights at Freddy's 3 makes an appearance on the left side of the room, just above the light switch, and we see the same fan we all know and adore, perched right on top of a bedroom dresser. In fact, look even closer. You'll see both the robot and the toy phone staring anxiously into the cracks of the closet, like they're waiting for Foxy to jump out. The phone guy did always say Foxy was his favorite. The topic of debate for the past week has certainly been an interesting one. There are spoilers abound, so be warned before continuing. Already having established that we play as the murderer's son, the Fifth Night minigame ends on a macabre note. The kid is being antagonized by his older brother and his friends before being tossed into the gaping mouth of Fredbear on stage. His mouth closes, and the kid's body goes limp instantly. After seeing this, the first and easiest conclusion people ran to was the possibility of this being the actual events that led to and caused the infamous bite of '87. But how do we know for sure? The lore has misdirected us before, and now that we think we have the whole timeline figured out, we're opening ourselves to further confusion. There's even an Easter egg that seems to tell the official year of the game's setting, which is actually 1983. What if what we saw on the Fifth Night minigame really was not the bite of '87, but just another tragic accident? I don't think it is, but this doesn't mean this birthday party didn't play any significant role. In fact, what you'll come to know is the bite of '87 quite possibly couldn't have happened if it wasn't for this birthday boy meeting with such a dark fate. Curious items such as flowers and medical equipment can be seen if you occasionally turn back to your bed, insinuating that this kid has been comatose and hospitalized after the accident, leading to the monsters that come patrolling the house in his dream. If we allude back to the first game, we receive a call from the phone guy telling us pretty important information.
But then there was the bite of '87. Yeah. It's amazing that the human body can live without the frontal lobe.
That means our victim is still somewhere alive out there. Sadly, since evidence points to a completely different accident, this is not the case for the child. Fredbear clearly crunches down on his entire head, and the child makes no conscious effort to resist at all. His body just went limp. After being hooked up to an IV, the kid may have died a few days later due to his wounds. Not even the greatest amount of sedatives and blood transfusions would end up saving him. Here's something else you may find interesting. If the bite of '87 involves severe damage to the frontal lobe, as we all know, there would be a variety of mental functions no longer available to the child. This includes personality, long-term memories, and dreams. That's right, dreams. If this kid were the actual victim of the infamous bite incident we've all been cutting ourselves up over, the nightmare animatronics afterwards wouldn't even exist in the game. What we are looking at is the first string of victims that were murdered before the second game. This was the reason a sister location had to be shut down prior to the setting of Five Nights 2, the location after the original Fredbear's Diner was closed down. Do you remember the call?
Now, I want you to forget anything you may have heard about the old locations, some people still have a somewhat negative impression of the company.
When the phone guy tells you to forget anything you may have heard about the last location, this could be a reference to the first 5 victims that would forever leave a dark blemish on the Fazbear reputation. The 5 victims, of course, being the smaller child, the older brother in the Foxy mask, and finally, his 3 fellow associates. Let's analyze this. It's no coincidence that the 4 masks are being worn by the older brother and his friends. We need to remember the first 4 animatronics written into the story, with Golden Freddy serving as our mysterious 5th piece of the puzzle. Far more than just a curious hallucination. This is where we are led to draw the parallels between the victims and the animatronics. Might the masks be symbolism that identifies which spirit went into each animatronic? Maybe we're getting too speculative about things. Our next point of interest is how the murderer actually went about claiming his first set of victims. During the operation of Fredbear's Diner, it's made clear to us that the father of this child already has his feet wet with acts of murder. We know this from the cake-giving minigame in Five Nights 2, when the Purple Man drives up, kills his first child, and then leaves. The father is already unstable, but the following incident at the party and his son's death was the pivotal event on the timeline that turned a father with a little blood on his hands into a sociopathic serial killer, and set the course of tragedies we've learned about in all previous games into motion. Now, with a distorted reality and a blurry moral code, the father reacts out of an almost instinctual rage and murders the remaining 4 kids, being the older brother and his lackeys. A few days later, after having went through medical procedures and non-stop supervision, the victim is eventually declared dead. This is proven in Night 6 at the end of the minigame, when you hear a faint but noticeable flatlining of a heart monitor. The child dies, and 4 then becomes 5. Notice how on the first night of Five Nights 2, the phone guy seems to deliberately sway you away from thinking too hard about the events from the last location. Intermittent pausing between sentences, frequently changing topics, trying his best to cover up his tracks. Sounds like this guy has more than a little something to be nervous about. That's because he also worked as an employee in the previous location before he snapped. We can actually confirm all of this because a rare minigame occurrence will actually show the purple guy helping another worker into one of the suits. This is evidence that the murderer was employed at Fazbear's Pizza at one point, and is also why the child was able to have such a lavish birthday party in the first place. The child's father was likely the person that garnered him that privilege. It's also worth noticing the suit being worn. It's Golden Bonnie, the same suit he will eventually use to murder a second set of children 4 years later in 1987, which, as we all know, yields his capture.
Someone used one of the suits. We had a spare in the back, a yellow one. Someone used it. Now none of them are acting right.
And while we're tossing around the subject of what happened 4 years later, let's look at the insight we're given as to which spirit inhabits which animatronic. There's an extreme likelihood of the 4 masks being worn at the party having less to do with coincidence and more with symbolism of who now exists in each suit. Does this mean, since the 4 children at the party inhabit the 4 base animatronics, the child you play as will become the mysterious 5th victim inhabiting Golden Freddy? Let's go ahead and give this one the benefit of the doubt, or lack thereof, and say yes. In the 3rd game, one of the final minigames displays the puppet animatronic giving the cake to the crying child, representing forgiveness. The 4 children before the table are presumed to be the bullies, seeing as how they're still wearing their signature masks, leading us to believe the child on the other side of the table was the same child we play as in Five Nights 4. This little piece of evidence I found from another theory made by the channel 8-Bit Gaming. Credit has to be given where credit's due, and I'm gonna be honest, I actually would not have noticed this had I not listened to some of their theories. But wait, isn't there one character we're overlooking? Sure, the puppet gives the cake to the crying child, revealing a much lighter tinted Freddy mask we assume to be Freddy's golden counterpart, but not a single spirit would have been able to part with their vengeance and move on if it wasn't for a certain character. Before you rescue any of the spirits in Five Nights 3, Mangle has to first receive the cake from her own minigame. What does this tell us? Well, firstly, it means that Mangle's role in unshackling these spirits might have been underplayed in the past, and her story is much more significant than most would have thought. Secondly, the spirit of the child inside the Mangle animatronic must have exclusive insight on how to free each ghost. The only person who could have possibly received that insight was someone who obviously knew how each child in that room died. Otherwise, any effort to unshackle the spirits would be in vain. I believe there's no coincidence as to why Mangle obtains the cake in Five Nights 3, because Mangle knows what can make the kids happy. She knows how to set them free. So once again I ask, was the fifth child destined to become Golden Freddy? Actually, I don't think so. While discussing key points on the timeline and the volatile mind of the child's father, we've overlooked one essential character, and probably the most important of all of them. The shocker? She doesn't even appear in the actual game, but once in a minigame in what looks to be a female's bedroom. An abused Mangle plush toy is seen in the corner of the room, ripped apart and limbs scattered. Why is Mangle showing up in the game when she wasn't even one of the original animatronics that antagonized us in the previous games? This is where Mangle's role in the actual bite of 87 shines brightest. Her second row of teeth, strong jawline, and option of disassembly are only a few reasons why it's so easy to label Mangle as the culprit of the accident, the actual bite of 87. As always, we still don't know for sure, but we can extrapolate from enough evidence that she is the prime suspect. But here's the kicker. Thanks to the second string of murders that take place around night 3 or 4 of the second game, there's now a spirit inside each animatronic, and that includes the terrifying takedown attraction addressed as the Mangle by the phone guy. That's important to consider when listening to Fredbear's Night 6 dialogue, when he tells the kid he is able to put him back together. This line of dialogue should be getting more attention than anything else in the game, because it would make sense to have the victim of one bite accident exist in the animatronic that would eventually come to cause another. The child wants his revenge. Aside from the somewhat cryptic placement of Mangle being the only toy in a different room segregated from the rest of his friends, only Mangle has the capability to be taken down and reassembled as suggested by Fredbear's dialogue. "You're broken," he says, "but we're still your friends." In an effort to give the child an opportunity to avenge his wrongful death, the ghost of the child in Five Nights 4 was placed inside the Mangle animatronic, giving him the ability to carry out his own brand of bloody vengeance. Like father, like son, I suppose. While you're probably realizing there were a few bits and pieces of this video that were based entirely upon speculation, we also went over plenty of facts and confirmable plot points in the timeline that can direct us to the proposed conclusion. Regardless of how scary these games genuinely were to others, no one can deny its power. An episodic journey that took us through lore as horrifying as this deserves some praise. Scott has displayed sheer brilliance in his writing, and dare I say I might even come to miss the games after a while. I miss hastily running from door to door, hopping from camera to camera trying to combat renegade sentient robots to prevent an agonizing and unbearably painful death before I'm eventually saved by a refreshing sunrise. This game didn't get popular by accident. It was meant to be a cult hit, and deep down, I believe Scott knew that. The destiny of Freddy and friends remains uncertain, and people are still tossing around questions if this game will really be the final chapter as the title suggests. If there's something you want to see, tell us below. We're always taking requests. Until next time.